Hello. Oh, thank you. Hello, my name is Peter Tatara. I'm the Director of Culture and Community here at Japan Society. And I want to welcome you all dearly to tonight's event, our annual Living Traditions Lecture. Living Traditions is a panel-style series that features cultural stewards from a diverse range of Japanese creative disciplines. The series explores the intersection of culture, nature, humanity, and tradition. The Living Traditions series is co-presented with the Japan Institute of the Portland Japanese Garden and with the support of the Government of Japan. We're very happy to have Ms. Susanuma from the Portland Japanese Garden in person. And deeply honored for Mr. Yamaguchi to be traveling all the way from Japan from the Prime Minister's office. They will both join in the reception afterwards, and I hope you have a moment to chat with them both. Tonight's event is the past and future of Kōgei. It is a very timely topic, as we will discuss shortly. If you're unfamiliar, Kōgei are traditional crafts in Japan. They are handmade items produced from raw materials collected according to traditional practices and manufactured using traditional techniques. Kōgei pieces can be common items like baskets, like pottery or lacquerware, but the artists who create them, they'll often devote their entire lives to honing their skills. Their works, they're elevated as art, and they are collected and cherished all around the globe. This said, with changing lifestyles and technologies, it is becoming difficult to maintain Kōgei culture. And there are fewer and fewer artists who continue Kōgei work. And this is especially true in the aftermath of the Noto Earthquake. On January 1st, 2024, a 7.6 magnitude earthquake struck Japan's Noto Peninsula. The Noto earthquake devastated the famed traditional lacquer city of Wajima and destroyed more than half of the city's 300 lacquer workshops. Tonight's event is held just after the one-year anniversary of the Noto earthquake. Its impact is still greatly felt in Wajima. Tonight, our speakers will discuss the history, evolution, and future of Kōgei through a conversation on philosophy and practice, with a specific focus on Wajima and its future. After the discussion, all attendees are encouraged to view pieces in our lobby from Wajima artist Keiji Onihira, who will be with us on stage tonight. And please enjoy the reception with sake donated by Desai, beer donated by Sapporo, and green tea donated by Itoen. Further, after the discussion, during the reception, there will be a brief demonstration of Kōgei tools and artistic practice around 8:30. Tonight's event brings together artists and experts from around the world. Everyone who will be on this stage has dedicated their lives to art, and I'm so eager to hear the conversation that develops and uniquely comes together as they discuss. I hope the dialogue tonight welcomes you all into the artist workshop. So now please join me in welcoming tonight's speakers. First, Dr. Monika Binczek. Dr. Binczek is the Diane and Arthur Abbey Curator for Japanese Decorative Arts at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. She has organized numerous exhibitions for the museum, notably Kimono Style, the John C. Weber Collection, Kyoto, Capital of Artistic Imagination, Japanese Bamboo Art, the Abbey Collection, and Discovering Japanese Art, American Collectors at the Met. She has published extensively on Japanese decorative arts and collecting history, recently in Kimono Style, Edo Traditions to Modern Design, and The Tale of Genji, a Japanese classic illuminated. Please, a round of applause for Dr. Binczek. Next, I'm honored to welcome Mr. Keiji Onihira. Mr. Onihira is a lacquer artist who was born in 1973 in Wajima City. He is a member of the Japan Kōgei Association and Wajima Lacquerware Techniques Preservation Society. At the age of only 18, Mr. Onihira began his apprenticeship under Master Sasahisa Kumano. Onihira's work has been selected multiple times for exhibitions in Japan and globally. In 2023, he became a member of the Wajima Lacquerware Techniques Preservation Society, where he continues to work toward preserving traditional techniques. He has received the Asahi Shimbun Prize at the Exhibition of Japanese Traditional Urushi Works, the Mayor of Kanazawa Award at the Ishikawa Traditional Art Crafts Exhibition, the Public Recognition Prize at the Ishikawa Prefecture Cultural Awards, and more. Please, a round of applause for Mr. Onihira. Next, a special guest we're excited to welcome from here in New York City, Mr. Gen Saratani. He is a New York-based artist who works exclusively with the materials found in traditional fine arts of Japan. Following high school and college studies in the arts in Japan, he served a 3-year apprenticeship with his father, lacquer artist Tomizo Saratani, and a 2-year apprenticeship under artist Akira Takeda in Kyoto. He now lives and works in New York. In addition to works of his own as an artist, he has conserved thousands of pieces of work, including pieces from the Prince Takamado Imperial Collection, as well as traditional works at Christie's, Sotheby's, and numerous other organizations. Please, a round of applause for Mr. Saratani. Finally, we invite to the stage Dr. Michelle Bambling. Dr. Bambling is the Senior Director of the Japan Society Gallery. She holds degrees from Columbia University in art history, specializing in Japanese art. She received a postdoctorate Jane and Morgan Whitney Fellowship from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where she also worked as a researcher in the Department of Asian Art. Dr. Bambling was an associate professor of art history at Zayed University in the UAE and New York University, Abu Dhabi, before joining Japan Society. Dr. Bambling has more than 3 decades of expertise with Japanese art, as well as extensive international curatorial experience. Please, a round of applause for our moderator, Dr. Michelle Bambling.
Good evening. Thank you, Peter. Welcome, everyone. I'm really excited about today's event, and we all had a chance to talk together yesterday and prepared our conversation, shared our slides, and put together the flow of a dialogue around the title, Living Traditions, the Past and Future of Kōgei. So we have a kind of conversational way of presenting, and I'd like to begin with a slide. And here we have a map of Japan highlighting the key cities of Kyoto, Osaka, Tokyo, and Wajima. And you can see from this map that Wajima is actually quite isolated from the cities that we're familiar with when we think about Japanese art history. And it's on the Noto Peninsula, and its isolated area is one reason why Wajima lacquer developed in such a characteristic way into such a very solid and strong tradition. And if you also look around the coastline, Wajima is along the coast, and that's part of its history and the distribution of Wajima ware. Wajimas began to be produced in the early 1600s, really it's sort of solidified slowly through the 17th century. But part of the distribution was that the small merchant boats were able to transport lacquerware all along Japan. And although we are familiar with Wajima through the artisanal traditions of the making of lacquer, it was such a strong community that the distribution of lacquer was also key to its importance. Just highlighting one idea is that lacquer, and we'll talk about this more, is a characteristic of lacquer is that it was very durable, and often used in daily life was transmitted through generations. And therefore, sometimes it would have a crack or it would wear out. And rather than getting rid of that, the merchants who came through would sometimes pick up the lacquer and return it to Wajima for repair and then take it back to the homes. So that is another part of the tradition. I'm not going to go into much more now, but I just thought I might introduce that idea when we think about its situation geographically and how many different levels of the artistry and distribution and appreciation and use of lacquer was a part of a very strong community and also cultural tradition in Japan. And it'll be Monica that will tell us a little bit more about the special characteristics. Here we have a slide just to give you an image of the past. This image shows, this is a detail from a early 17th century folding screen that shows the inside of a workshop where people were making lacquer. Please note that this is in Kyoto, and we're talking about Wajima. So while lacquer was a shared tradition, there's something very distinctive about the Wajima lacquer, which maybe you would like to tell us about, please.
Good evening. It is my great pleasure to be here, so thank you, Michelle, for including me in this conversation. I visited Wajima for the first time in the year 2000, and I was immediately fascinated by the beautiful scenery, the sea, the mountains, and the lacquer. So many Japanese people, when hear the word lacquer production, immediately associate lacquer bowls with Wajima, Wajima nuri, Wajima lacquerware. And as you can see in the slide, they produce black and red lacquer. If you eat Japanese food, the food tastes so much better when you eat it out from a lacquer bowl, and it looks great in red or black lacquer. And they produce beautifully decorated items such as the so-called chinkin ware. Chinkin is the sunken gold technique. When you make incisions into the lacquer surface, you press gold leaf or gold powder and create flowers or other decorative patterns. This is one of the techniques associated with Wajima lacquerware. The history of Wajima lacquer goes back to the 16th century, when in Wakayama Prefecture, the Negoro temple burned down. You might remember the word Negoro lacquer, a very sturdy, beautiful, functional vessel that were made by monks in the Zen monastery of Nagoroji. Sturdy wooden body with many layers of foundation, black and red lacquer, and as you use it, you rub off the uppermost red lacquer, the black comes to the surface. So that's the technique that was created by Zen monks. When Toyotomi Hideyoshi destroyed the monastery, the monks had to flee, and some ended up in Wajima. They brought the technique with themselves, and the Nagoro technique became the base of all the Wajima lacquer production.
Thank you. So here I have a slide here again so that we can think about the past. This is from a 1797 edition of a book that was woodblock printed. And you can see that here we have figures that are engaged in collecting the sap. So speaking about the distribution of the work, here the very materials, this is the foundation of lacquer. It was illustrated. It was also a trade that was passed down, had its own tools and its own techniques. You could see here the scoring of the trees. And then maybe we can talk about this a little bit with the artisans here present. I'll give one more opportunity before we jump into that. And now we have the 1 year past, 1 year ago. So built on the tradition that we just discussed, you're looking at a very sad slide of the aftermath of the 7.6 earthquake that struck on January 1 in 2024. And in this area where we had the morning market, it's now utterly flattened. This was an area where more than half of the city's 300 lacquer studios were destroyed. And at that time, Onihira-san was present, and he was in the second story of his home, and maybe he'll tell us a little bit about being born and raised in Wajima and being there on that tragic day and continuing to practice there to this moment.
こんにちは。こんばんはか。そうですね。当日は1月1日元旦でお正月でお休みだったんですけども、仕事を少ししてまして、揺れが来て、自分も椅子に座ってたんですけど、ずりっと落ちるくらいの揺れでした。 まあ幸い建物は半壊で済んだんですけども、まあ水道やら電気やらそういうものがずっと止まってましたので、まあ生活するだけで精一杯だったというのがその何ヶ月か漆の仕事なかなかできない中で、悶々とした時もちょっとありましたけども。
So, as you could see on the slide, and also for those of you who had heard it on the news, the earthquake happened on January 1st, on New Year's Day, and theoretically it's a holiday, but I was doing a little bit of work, and then the tremors came, and I was sitting in a chair, and all of a sudden, it was quite a bit of sideways movement, and to the point where I almost fell out of the chair. And fortunately, the building was only half destroyed instead of being completely destroyed. But of course, the pipes burst. There was also power outage, and this was something that continued for several months. So even everyday life was quite difficult, much less being able to focus on working. And of course, there were also numerous aftershocks as well.
まあ副産物といえば水道が出なかったので給水活動に一生懸命勤しんで筋トレになって健康的になりました。
So, as I mentioned, we had no water because the pipes burst. So I was helping with, both obtaining and then delivering water to within the community. And it actually was a really good workout, and I actually gained some muscles from it.
That makes me think of a conversation we had about this yesterday, and you also helped your daughter sort of face this disaster and have a kind of forward-moving attitude towards how to help others through this, and you did this together, didn't you, with your daughter?
はい。まあ娘もちょうど今12歳なんですけれども、地震の記憶も残って、そして今後の生活にまあいい経験じゃないんですけど、体験になってたくましく育ってほしいなと思ってます。
So she's 12 right now, but of course, since it only happened just over a year ago, it's still pretty clear in her memory. But I hope that I can't say this was a good experience, but certainly it was a learning experience that I hope she can take this to go forwards in life, and that this will be helpful for her to face any other adversities that might come her way in the future.
Okay, thank you. So we'll return to the discussion of the future of both Wajima as a city and also of the lacquerware produced there. We'd like to begin with speaking with both of the artists here tonight about why they have become lacquer artists, their background, what inspires them. And so we'd like to start with Onihira-san, please, and maybe you would like to talk to us a little bit about how you came to become a lacquer artist.
僕は石川県輪島市の生まれで、そして何気なく仕事を始めたというのが正直な話なんです。自分の家も親もその前もずっと同じ産業で仕事を続けてきたもので、何気なく自然に入ったというのがスタートです。
So I was, as you heard earlier, I was born in Wajima, in Ishikawa Prefecture, and I just have to say it was kind of a natural progression because my family, and not just my immediate family, but the previous generation as well, had all been working in the field, so it kind of just happened.
それで若い時にはそういう思いでやり進めてきたんですけれども、自分が仕事を始めた頃にどんどん経済状況というかバブルがはじけて、世の中が世の中というか仕事がどんどん減っていくっていう様子を見て、これじゃいけない、もう一度勉強し直さないといけないなと思って、輪島の漆の漆芸研修所というところなんですけども、 そこへ学び直すために入りました。
So, as I mentioned, when I was young, I was just like, oh, I'm just going to follow the family tradition, and didn't really think much beyond that. But then the 90s, the economic crisis, the bubble bursting in Japan, really, I saw people all around me lose their jobs, and the economic situation was not very good. So I decided that I need to go back and study the art and the craft much more deeply. So that's why I enrolled in the Ishikawa Prefectural Wajima Lacquer Arts Training Institute.
その時には勉強のためだったんですけども、当時輪島の人間が勉強に行くっていうのは少なくて、他の漆の美しさとかそういう面白さを勉強したいっていう他からの人がたくさんいたんですね。その人たちが漆に憧れてワクワクしながらものを作ってる姿を見て、自分はそういうことを考えたことなかったもんですから、こんなに漆の世界って憧れる存在なんだなっていうのを自覚したのがその時代です。
And, at the time, I would say that most of the students were actually not of Wajima. There were many, many more students that had come to Wajima to study Wajima lacquerware because they had fallen in love with it. And so I had never thought of it. Like I said, it was just a family, tradition. And I had to kind of think it over and say, wow, I never thought Wajima lacquerware was something that could be so beloved. And I really kind of did some soul searching and came to, that realization that it's something that I should treasure as well.
そうやって少し大人になったというか自覚が出てきまして、そう思って卒業してさあどうしようかと思ってたところに、東京の国立博物館での四庫修理室で、中尊寺の巻柱という蒔絵の大きな復元模造の仕事が話がいただきまして、ちょうど卒業でちょうどいいタイミングなんで、ちょっと大江戸に勉強に遊びにじゃないですけど、そういう気持ちで気軽に行ったんですけども、その中で、いろんな勉強というか体験をしました。
So it just happened. So I got the self-awareness and self-realization, and then I came to graduate. And just as I was graduating, there was a posting about a restoration project at the Tokyo National Museum lacquerware restoration office. They were doing the inner pillars of the temple Chusonji. And I said, well, I mean, this is great timing. I might as well learn a few other techniques. So I just decided to apply and got in and got accepted and really went there just for the heck of it. I hadn't really thought, but it really led to me really deepening my understanding and gaining a lot of other experience.
そのところではもちろん復元模造が僕の仕事の手伝いだったんですけども、それとは別にその修理をしている現場も隣にありまして、そこで国宝の品物とか重要文化財とかそういう有名な伝承品、本に出てるような伝承品、そういうものを間近で見る機会がありまして、すごく勉強になりました。またお昼休みなんかはすぐ地下から上がればいろんな品物を見る機会が毎日ありましたので、そういう体験も僕にとって田舎で輪島塗しか知らないかった自分にとってはとっても刺激的な一年でした。
So, even though the project itself was about restoration, there was also a lot of repair work that was happening on site of other things. And it was amazing to just have national treasures and other things I had only seen in books before, just strewn about, either waiting to or being within the stages of being restored or repaired. And in fact, also on lunch breaks, we were in the basement, but when I could just go upstairs and see all these other precious objects on display. So, especially having come from such a rural area like Wajima, it was just an extraordinary, unforgettable experience.
そういうことでいろんなご縁をいただきまして、自分のはるか勉強する以上にいろんなことを学ぶ機会をいただいたところが僕としては収穫でした。そして、やっと大人になったというか自覚が出てきて自分でもものを作っていきたいとかいうそういう自覚が出てきたわけです。そして輪島に帰って展覧会の作品活動に始まりました。
So, I just thought I was so fortunate to have been able to go beyond just what I studied in school and actually learn through experience, through doing. And I gradually decided that I wanted to start crafting my own pieces. And so I returned to Wajima and started assisting with curating various exhibitions.
So now let's take a look at those pieces. And here we have a beautiful work, which is also on display. So after you leave the conversation, you'll have a chance to see this and other works in person. So I'd love to hear Onihira-san tell us a little bit about this work. And you might notice that the title is Dawn. So he titles his works in a very innovative and contemporary way. As he carries down along the tradition, he also innovates and brings in his own approach.
これは朝日に照らされた海岸の水面のそういう美しさを表現したくてデザインしたものです。
So, the image I had in my head when I came up with the design was of the ocean surface, the reflection on the water of the ocean in early morning.
細かく言いますと箱の上の方後面の部分は朝日に照らされた雲とそして太陽を螺鈿で表現しました。
So the top part, the top half of the box actually represents the rays of the morning sun and the clouds.
そして、側面の上3分の1ほど赤というか金色になっているところは、朝日に照らされた空の色。そして、その下の方が細く白い螺鈿で線が入っているのが水平線になります。そして下の方は波頭が立っているとそういうデザインになっています。
So, and then if you look towards the top of the side, the part that's kind of red and yellow reflects the sky at dawn. And then the bottom 2/3 or so are the waves and the surface of the sea.
その波の部分が金を使ったり、螺鈿貝を使ったりして色鮮やかに表現をしたものです。
And so the waves themselves were colored using gold and also different shells, so that I could represent various colors.
伝統的に花鳥風月というかそういうモチーフのものが一般的なんですけれども、どこの国でも海があればそういう朝日とか夕日とか見る機会ってあると思うんで、そういう人たちに共感してもらえるような作品を作りたいなと思って作ったわけです。
So such scenes or motifs of like the ocean and the sky are very common and very traditional, but I wanted to depict it in such a way that anyone who lives anywhere near the sea or has traveled to the ocean and has appreciates a sunrise or a sunset would be able to see it and appreciate it.
Thank you. It's beautiful the way you were able to materialize through the arts of lacquer and its various materials, the ethereal beauty of the light at dawn.
美しい
And then here we have the other two works that you'll have an opportunity to view as well. And they also have intriguing titles such as Travel to the Moon and Flying Swallows. This is something that's steeped in tradition yet highly innovative. Perhaps you'd like to tell us about this as well.
革新的だとは自分は思うんですけど、なんかこの2つの作品についてもちょっと説明して。
そうですね。こちらは月から見た地球というデザインで月面旅行という題名になります。
So the piece on the left is titled Travel to the Moon because it is the view of the Earth as if you were standing on the surface of the moon.
漆の色彩の特色である黒っていうのを生かしてそれを宇宙空間で箱の一面で表現できればなと思って作ってみました。
So I used the most fundamental color that is very unique to lacquer, which is the really dark black. And I used it because I wanted to represent the absolute blackness of space.
地球の部分は卵殻うずらの卵を砕いたり少しずつ置いてったりして表現したもので、海の部分とかは青い漆で表現しました。
So in terms of the Earth, the white portions, the swirling clouds, was created using pulverized quail egg that I carefully laid on the lacquer, and then the blue, the oceans, were using blue lacquer pigment.
月のクレーターの部分はこう少し凸凹をつけて月の表面を行ったことはないんですけども、そういう表現をちょっと試みたものです。銀シルバーで表現しました。
So in terms of the craters, I decided to make it bumpy, add a little three-dimensionality to it. I mean, not that I've been to the moon, but I imagine from photos that I've seen, imagine what it might be like. And for that, I used silver.
僕としては面白みのある作品になったなと思って作ったんですけども、諸先輩方には非常に不評でした。不評でした。
不評？そうだったんですか? So I thought it turned out to be a rather intriguing piece, but apparently it received a lot of negative critique.
そんなもんだろうなって思ってます。
But I was like, well, I guess that's to be expected.
And maybe we'll just move along into sources of inspiration and maybe just a few words, if you don't mind telling us about why you chose to represent two different lacquer artists that inspire you.
刺激を受けた方に。
漆してる人なら誰でもご存知の漆の神様と言われている松田先生ですね。僕は会ったことも見たこともないんですけれども、石川県の金沢から出て、そして東京に出て、そして日本工芸会も創立に関わるそのバイタリティとかそういうものにはすごく憧れるというかすごいなと思います。そしてもちろん作品もできてそういう活動もできるっていう、そういう人間に僕は憧れたというかすごく尊敬しています。
So this Matsuda Sensei is known to pretty much anyone who works with lacquer. I mean, he's considered almost one of the gods of lacquer art and lacquerware. But unfortunately, I've never had the chance to see or meet him. But not only, so he was from Kanazawa, which is also in Ishikawa Prefecture, but he was not just a brilliant artist and craftsman, but He also was very active within the field, such as being one of the founding members of the Japan Kōgei Association. So the fact that he could juggle so many hats was a big source of inspiration for me. I'm a huge fan, or rather, to say fan, I mean I have the utmost respect for him.
田口義邦先生は私が漆の仕事を初めて見た生きてる系の人間国宝でした。僕が漆の研修所で、1年に1回東京から教えに来てくれる先生です。見ての通りすごく大胆で面白い一生をされる先生でした。
東京から来られたの？
東京の先生です。
So Taguchi Sensei, who is a living national treasure, he actually teaches and works in Tokyo, but this is one of the first masters that I had the fortune of meeting when I started working with lacquer. And in fact, he comes to Wajima once a year from Tokyo, and he is
He passed.
I had the fortune of meeting him, and he had been coming annually to Wajima from Tokyo to impart his knowledge. But he produces, as you can see, brilliant pieces as well.
今まで輪島塗で輪島の蒔絵っていうことだけしか知らなかった自分にとって粗い金粉を使ったりたくさんの螺鈿を使ったりそして、すごくユーモアのある先生でしたんでそういうのもすごく僕にとっては大切な短い時間でしたけど大切な時間を過ごして勉強になりました。僕が卒業した後作品する前にもう亡くなってしまったんで残念ながら僕の作品を見てもらう機会とかそういう話はなかったんですけども地球を見たらどう思ったんですかね。
So, at the time that I first met him, I had only known about Wajima lacquer and Wajima lacquerware. So he opened my eyes to a whole various other techniques and the use of other materials, other types of shell and so forth and pigment. But he was also very humorous. He had very warm and funny personality. So even though I only got to spend a very short time with him, I learned so much. And unfortunately, he had already passed by the time that I was creating my own pieces. I wonder what he would have thought about that travel to the moon.
Thank you. So sharing the delightful sense of humor. Another source of inspiration, I understand, is Bob Dylan. Is that right? So while you're working, you enjoy listening to Dylan?
Thank you. もちろん音楽を聴きながらいろんなインスピレーションというかそういうものを感じるのは、僕にとっては同じ時代の作り手よりもそういった違った分野の芸術の人に影響を受けるっていうのは今の僕の状況です。
So, yeah, I actually try to immerse myself in other genre, not just learn from my fellow colleagues within the field, but also I expand out. So I do listen to all sorts of music to try to get inspiration for my work.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. So now let's turn to our other guest tonight, and this is Gen Sadatani-san. And here we see photographs that he very kindly shared of himself in his studio here in New York. So we have a wonderful opportunity to compare the two experiences and locations here tonight in New York City. So again, would you like to tell us a little bit about the way in which you came to practice lacquer and your approach?
Sorry. Good evening, everyone. I finally got my turn. And, but unfortunately, I feel sorry, but I don't have much dramatic story on me. I also born in traditional Japanese lacquer art family as third generation. So it's very common way to be a Japanese lacquer artist in to born in Japanese
だから
lacquer
海平
art
さんほど
craft family.
で間違い
But my lucky thing was my father does very creative work, and he also travel around the world, out of Japan, and he started working out of Japan mainly in Europe, and I had chance to go out of Japan when I was very small, and I have chance to look Japan from outside earlier as Japanese lacquer artist. So it's very special or meaningful for me and my father, and that's why I'm still working out of Japan. Yeah.
Thank you. Would you like to say a word about setting up the studio here in New York?
仕事をできてると思ってます。
Right, so urushi, the Japanese lacquer, has a little kind of unique characteristic that it need to manage a humidity pretty well. Like we need very high humid to cure, to get harden the lacquer. So it's a little hard or harder, especially in the winter time. The room humidity gets very dry here in New York, so I'm kind of having a little hard time to manage an appropriate humidity here. Yeah.
Thank you. And here we have some very sort of personally shared photographs of the tools, and maybe you'd like to, these will be on display outside, so you'll have a chance to see them, but here's an opportunity to maybe say a few words about the tools that you've shared.
Right, actually that images are, I just sent her as a, yeah, no, I didn't expect to be.
みんなに見せられるとは
I
思ってな
just
かったです
showed her I can bring some tools, so I just
どういうも
took
のを持ってく
snaps.
る
So
か説明
please forget about it. You can look
写
up
真で
everything
表すだけです
on the hall, at the hall, so you can like get closer and you can take a look. Or if you have any questions, you can just ask me or ask him what to use. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And maybe a note about the approach to lacquer conservation as part of your practice.
Right. So the weather, the humidity is very different, and also most pieces, all lacquer pieces made or paint on wood piece. So it mostly cause of the wood dry or wood bend, or it mostly very oftenly cracks or bends or peels the surface off. So I have many broken pieces to work on. Yeah, it's stacking up here. Yeah.
結構優れたもの
And you'll notice this example of a Namban work that we'll be speaking about later, but you've been working with very important works and drawing inspiration from tradition, yet at the same time, you have your own creative practice. Perhaps you'd like to share this extraordinary work with us.
Right, that's my first work. As I'm working as a restorer for like over 10 years, then at some point I kind of become to be, then I want to make something by my own, but I actually don't have much strong messages or philosophies to add into or onto my artwork, so I try to simplify my piece to focus on method, as like maquille or the roilo, the painting technique. So I'm trying to brush up my skill to make it into a higher quality, to be finer work, and that brings my piece into fine art.
And also into the gallery setting. So here we can see.
That's also all the same, in the same concept. I don't have any messages, but the sphere is one of the hardest shape to make into the right, you can realize if it's not in a right shape. So I'm trying to make it into as much I could nicely or nicer sphere shape. Then people can see if it's fine work or if it's not fine. Right.
The luster is beautiful, and it reminds me of the slide that Monica began speaking of with the contrast of the red and the black, which is just truly has this depth of beauty, especially specific to lacquer. Now, thank you both for telling us about your practice, your sources of inspiration, and Monica, if you would please give us some context for these practices in terms of the debate around Kōgei.
So I'm here to represent the past, and I'm going to give a little introduction about the word Kōgei, which we use today. You can translate it as art crafts, or decorative arts. It fits into a bigger conversation about how you define fine arts versus decorative arts. So actually, this is a new word in Japan, because in the Edo period, maybe we can move to the next slide, please, they did not use these umbrella terms. Every art form had its own name, so they used the word ceramic, textile art, metal art, and each object had its unique term or name. And the idea to group them and make a divide between fine arts and decorative arts happened only in 1873 at the Vienna World Exposition, when the Japanese government for the first time exhibited artworks and wanted to introduce itself as a new nation state on stage of Europe. And they had to adjust to European art history principles, and at the time in Germany, they divided paintings, sculptures, and architecture, saying that these are the higher art form. They called them fine arts, and the Japanese term became bijutsu to describe all these together, while decorative arts that incorporate ceramics, textile art, metal art, glass, and lacquer became Kōgei, which is the translation of the German term. So that divide, unfortunately, created a very difficult situation in the history of Japanese art, because in Japanese art, everything is connected with everything. So even when we think of a byobu, a folding screen, it's a furniture. It has lacquer frame. It functions as a space divider. So it's very hard to say that this is only a painting. And you need many, many craftspeople to work together to create these artworks. So right now there is a debate, maybe we can go to the next slide, how we can reposition Kōgei within the art world in Japan. Is there a new way to describe what we mean by crafts? And maybe we should just go back to the Edo period and forget about what happened in 1873 and look at Japanese art as a whole, without trying to define what is fine art, what is decorative art, or just say that everything that is produced in Japan is art, and try to forget about Kōgei. But this is an ongoing debate, and there are lots of varying opinions about how we translate, we don't translate, and I hope that actually the young lacquer artists are not worried about how we define Kōgei. They just keep producing beautiful artworks, and the art historians will make this decision how we deal with the Kōgei problem. Now I'm going to introduce the history of makie very, very briefly, because we use the word makie. So I felt that I will explain a little bit about the development of this very unique Japanese technique. Many of the lacquer art forms came from China to Japan, except for the sprinkled gold, the makie technique. Makie literally means sprinkled picture. And I'm showing you one of the oldest existing example of a Japanese makie artwork. It's in the collection of the Shosoin, which was associated with the Todaiji temple in Nara. It was made in the 8th century by Japanese craftsmen. And this is a scabbard for a very precious sword. And it's a decoration almost like a hand scroll. It has a story about birds and cats. So it's a landscape, and you see cats sort of making friends with birds, and then it turns sour for the birds, because as you can see in the picture, the cat's going to have fun with them. But the story is depicted in sprinkled gold and inlaid mother of pearl. And this is one of the oldest artworks when we could identify the sprinkled gold maquillage technique. It's beautifully executed, one of the most important treasures, and you can see how vivid the composition and how delightful the way the cats and the birds depicted in mother of pearl and gold. So the maquillage is a complicated technique, but put it extremely simply, you need urushi, which is the word, the Japanese word for lacquer. You can paint with it. You have very fine brushes. The urushi is like honey. It's a substance that it's not watery, but more like, as I mentioned, honey. You draw a design, and then you have the gold powder, very fine pulverized gold that you put into a sprinkling tube. You sprinkle the powder on top of the urushi, and the metal is heavy, so it's going to sink into the urushi, and the urushi is going to close on the top. That's why you cannot rub it off with your finger. The urushi is holding it in place, and when you polish it, the last illustration in the small graphic, basically you cut the gold powder into half. That's why it's so sprinkly shiny, because you polish off the upper half of the tiny ball, which is the gold powder. With that relatively simple technique, you can create many types of decoration. These are microscopic images, 50 magnification. I wanted to show you how the gold powder actually sits within the urushi. The left slide shows the flat design, so the red line is the urushi with red pigment in it, and the background has potato chips shaped gold powder, which is usually to create the background texture. It's called nashiji ground in Japanese. And the right side shows a little bit of the relief maquillage, the tall or high maquillage, taka maquillage, which is used to make rocks and trees elements which are depicted in a relief pattern. So we talked about Gen's work, making work on exported artwork, and I wanted to bring into the conversation early export lacquerware, because the conversation about how the Westerners encountered lacquer and how we admired the beauty of the shiny black surface or the lacquer design with gold or mother of pearl goes back to the 16th century, when the Portuguese, the Spaniard, and the English went to Japan and brought back beautiful furniture made by Japanese craftsmen like Onihira-san and Gen-san, based on European furniture. And these Namban coffers and cabinets were very expensive items owned by aristocrats in Europe, still preserved in country houses. And they represented the craftsmanship and skill of Japanese lacquer artisans in Europe. And inspired by the beauty of lacquer, the technique itself was imitated by Europeans, and it was called Japaning. So the country itself became identified with applying lacquer on furniture. The next slide is from the Metropolitan Museum of Art collection. This is the best maquillage piece we have. It's my pride and joy. This is from a wedding set made in 1633. It's a dated piece. It's part of a bigger set that it's actually owned by the Tokugawa Art Museum in Nagoya. And this is a cosmetic box which was made to celebrate the wedding of Princess Kame, a princess from the Tokugawa family. The design is a river with chrysanthemums, rocks, and a poem about white dewdrops on chrysanthemums, which is associated with longevity. You might know the story of Kikuchido, the chrysanthemum boy who became immortal because he drank dewdrops from chrysanthemum petals and leaves. So it's a very, very auspicious design. Let's move to the next slide. And this is the lid. So with silver and gold and the application of flat and relief design elements, they can create a landscape which is not only painterly but almost sculptural because of the relief takamaki application. It's a beautiful, beautiful gold and silver world, if you wish. You can see the Tokugawa family crest to emphasize the importance of the wedding. And the small details give you the idea how detailed the technique is. So the rock is made of silver and gold haimakie, takamakie. There is an inlaid character. This is the character of Hito, which is cut out of 24 karat gold and inlaid into the takamakie piece. And the tiny squares, both silver and gold, are kirikane. So somebody laid flat a sheet of gold, cut it into tiny, tiny squares with a bamboo spatula and with a bamboo tool that you have to lick. And then you pick up the squares one by one, place into the lacquer, create texture of the rock. What I'm trying to say that this is not only beautiful, it's extremely time-consuming and luxurious to make. Only the elite in Japan had access to lacquer objects of that quality. And when you make a mistake, you cannot go back to fix it. So you have to be very, very precise. And that's why these skills like Onihira-san and Gen-san described that they learned for many years, they honed their skills. It's important because it's a very unforgiving technique. When we go into the 18th, 19th century, in France, especially in Paris, Japanese lacquer objects were very popular. Queen Marie Antoinette had a collection of Japanese lacquer. And that inspired a style which is basically based on the Rococo aesthetics that was still popular in the 19th century. This small box in our collection brings the Rococo aesthetic up to the 19th century. A tiny box, it's for incense, and it's that small. And the lid is decorated with a composition of Chinese boys playing with a snowball. The snowball is in silver. It's oxidized, but originally it was white. And when you open it, there is a surprise. All of a sudden, you have 3 small boxes, 2 in the shape of butterflies, and there is a rhomboid with a peony. And that's one of the beauty of lacquer boxes. The inside of the lid decorated with different patterns, and it's such a satisfying experience to handle these boxes.
Thank you very much. So we're returning to the very beginning, and we're thinking about the future of Kōgei. We've taken a look at the past, discussed the present, and now we're projecting. And we're also thinking about it's 1 year after the earthquake in Wajima. And we would like to have you sort of think this through with us. One of the slide here is to have us think about the world that we're in now, and we're thinking about environmental change, global warming, and how does that impact the survival of lacquerware? Because as we know, the raw materials of lacquer come from nature. The base, we have the wooden base, which gives a very durable support. We have the lacquer sap that's been collected, and we have other traditions, such as the gold leaf in Kanazawa and other places. We've talked about the interaction of many traditions together to sustain a community and to continue the making of traditions. Even the tools here, the tools are a scarcity now because the craftspeople who used to make the tools, many of them are no longer being made, so the artisans need to make their own tools or find sources from the past. These 2 slides are meant to have us start to think about it. And then one other slide we want to think about is the change in custom and culture and the way in which lacquerware was so integral to daily lives and also to special occasions throughout Japanese society. So I would love to just frame that discussion with these few slides and welcome our speakers to share their views.
My first very brief comment is about the urushi tree, the lacquer tree, if you wish, because it's a long-term investment to create a little lacquer tree forest, if you wish, because you plant the trees and then you have to wait 20 years until the tree is harvestable. And In the Edo period, it was the government, the Tokugawa government, who had the means and the money to invest into lacquer tree production. And nowadays, it's very difficult to find people who are willing to do that. And harvesting, the skill itself, is sort of dying out. There are less and less craftsmen who are capable of the traditional cutting and collecting of the lacquer.
That's right, and often the lacquer is imported to Japan from China. Sometimes there are resins being used instead. There are all sorts of challenges to sustain the actual materiality from the past, and maybe one or two of you might chime in terms of sourcing the materials for your practice.
材料は、僕は蒔絵を専門にしている方が多いので、あまりたくさん漆を買ったりっていうのはない、そんなに苦労はするほどものは買ってないんですけども、一つ言えるのは蒔絵の金粉、蒔絵に使う金粉というのが僕が仕事を始めた頃はよりもう10倍ぐらい値段が上がってますんで、そういう意味で苦労してます。
So, I'm a makie specialist, so I haven't had too much difficulty because I don't necessarily deal with the wood itself or the sap. But in terms of the, to give a good example, from when I first started creating my own pieces to now, the price of the gold powder that I used in the makie has gone up at least 10 times. Like it's 10 times as much more expensive than it was when I first started.
そういうわけで材料は使いにくくなってるんですけれど、材料が上がってるから金額も上げればいいっていうほど上げられるもんでもないもんですから、あとは工夫していろんな材料を使い分けてやってます。
So even though it's harder to obtain the materials, it's not like I can proportionally raise the price of the finished piece. So it just means that I have to get more inventive and creative with how I use the materials that I can get a hold of.
Thank you. And perhaps you would like to speak a little bit about changing contexts again. So we see the lacquer artists are also moving into contemporary art and into exhibitions, such as here. We saw your example, and here's another example. What are your views about the future of lacquer?
So actually, those are one of solutions to get more budget to spend or to buy expensive gold powders or real Japanese lacquer costs 5 times than like Chinese Japanese lacquer. So people start using cheaper, and I have to say it's not 5 times better than Chinese. So people start use Japanese lacquer now. So but I want to stick on tradition and pure. So their solution is to bring lacquer piece, not only the furnitures or boxes, into more like fine art. Then I could ask more budget to live to make better quality pieces.
Thank you very much. And when we think about the evolution of lacquer, as Monica walked us through from the 8th century all the way through, we see that there's been change and response all the way through. And the idea of being innovative is a consistent aspect of lacquer making. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much, all of you, for sharing your insights and experiences. And And we get to continue now. I think Peter's about to come up and guide us into the next stage where we have demonstrations of materials and artwork out on view.
Thank you all again for joining us for this singular evening. Before we depart for the reception, I'd like to ask for a few rounds of applause. A round of applause for Dr. Michelle Bambling for leading the conversation. Dr. Monica Binchek. Artist Gen Saratani, artist Keiji Onihira, interpreter Mari Morimoto, A deep thank you as well to Ms. Sasanuma from the Japan Institute of the Portland Japanese Garden, Mr. Yamaguchi from the Government of Japan. Now, please join us upstairs for a reception, and also please note the exhibits in our lobby. We'll have our artists up there as well, leading brief demonstrations. Thank you all.